Welcome in to the Blitz, folks. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Corey Stacey, and we have another jam-packed week. It's a glorious Friday, and yes, we are only one day away from another fantastic Saturday in college football. We've got a full slate today. We're going to go over our picks, talk about last week's picks, and how about those Cubbies? It was just time. They got it done. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this edition of the Blitz here on this wonderful November Friday. All right. A lot of good games. A lot of good games. Again, we thank you for listening to this edition of the Blitz with Corey Stacey. I got to start throwing that in there because it's come to my attention that there are a couple of shows out there that actually have the title The Blitz. So I'm not sure if that's like, a big deal. But you just never know in today's society, right? So we'll just start throwing that in there. The Blitz with Corey Stacey. And yes, I am your host, Corey Stacey, and very glad that you're listening to another show here. It's a lot of fun, and we're keeping the ball rolling here on The Blitz with Corey Stacey. And what we've been doing the last few weeks is picking 5 or 6 games of the week, telling you what the spread is, and practically, picking whether or not we believe that team that's favored will cover the spread. And we were doing really good until last week, or the week before last. We got 2 out of I believe 2 out of 6 right last week, or the week before last. So let's find out how we did last week. Or this week, however you want to look at it. Last week we picked we picked the Kentucky-Missouri game. We picked the West Virginia, Oklahoma State game, Michigan State game, Clemson, Florida State game, Tennessee and South Carolina game, and the Georgia-Florida game. And let's just find out how did we do. But real quick, I've got to give another shout out to the Cubbies, okay? They beat the Indians Game 7 in the 10th inning. What a fantastic World Series that was. I was dragging ass the next day at work because I could not go to bed. It was the most fantastic World Series that I've ever seen. And I was pulling for the Cubs. I mean, it was just time. 108 years. It was just time. And it was really fantastic to see that team get it done. And they did. What an incredible game. The way that everything played out. The way the Cubs came back, won 3 in a row to take it to Game 7. For that game to have gone in the 10th inning after a rain delay. It was truly good sport. And, I got to be honest, I don't follow baseball that much. But that game really had me locked in. And it was really exciting to see a baseball game with that much enthusiasm and firepower. It was fantastic, and I hope that going forward, baseball will continue to appeal to me that way because it was just so much fun to watch. Now, I mean, the Cubs and Indians ratings were out of the roof. They said it's beat football's ratings by far. It beat last year's NBA final ratings between the Cavs and the Warriors. I mean, unbelievable. It was really good. So I want to give a shout out to the Cubs because they deserved the win, and it was just it was really fun to watch. It was really fun to watch. If you didn't get a chance, I really feel like you missed out because it was such a great baseball game. All right, so let's move on to college football, okay? And let's see, how did we do last week? The first game that we picked last week was Missouri and Kentucky, and we were dead wrong. Not the way I wanted to start off this segment here with being dead wrong. Missouri was actually favored in this game by 6.5 points. And I'm trying to find the game here so we can see what the score was. Kentucky's on a roll right now. I think that's obvious to everyone. But I did not think that they would come out and beat Missouri the way that they did. The game was practically over from the start. Kentucky just got off to a monster start. Again, Missouri was favored by 6.5 points, and Kentucky won this game 35-21. I had Missouri covering the spread. I thought Drew Lock and company at home would have done a much better job, but they didn't. So we got that one wrong. Not the way we want to start off, okay? The second game that we have, well, real quick, let's talk about Kentucky for a second. They've won 4 out of their last 5 games. Mark Stoops went from being on the hot seat, and you know, we see this every week in college football, but now he's contending for the East with Kentucky. Unbelievable. That's when you know the East is bad. When Kentucky is, you know, contending for the East. That's when you know it's really bad. Steven Johnson, the QB this year, 1,128 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, QBR rating of 52.5. The kid's playing good. Stanley Williams is really the stud on this team, the running back, Stanley Williams. He has 821 yards already on the season, 109 carries. But here's an interesting stat, only 3 touchdowns. So he's just putting up a ton of yards and not getting the touchdowns. They're not doing too shabby on the receiving end either. Jeff Badgett, 496 yards receiving, 20 receptions for 4 touchdowns on the year so far. But, you know, Kentucky's running the ball well, and Mark Stoops has them playing, you know, pretty decent defense. They lost their first 2 games. They lost to Southern Miss. Then they lost to Florida. They beat New Mexico State, New Mexico State and South Carolina. They put up 62 points on New Mexico State. Granted, it is New Mexico State, but beat South Carolina. Lost to Alabama 34-6, and then they've won the 3 games following the Alabama game. They beat Vandy, Mississippi State, and now Missouri. They get Georgia this week. And I think the Bulldogs need to look out. We'll talk about that game. It's going to be in our top 6 of our games of the week. That game's in Kentucky too, so we'll go over that. But yeah, Kentucky rolling right now. They've won 4 out of their last 5 games, and they continue to kind of improve. And you know, it's I don't want to put too much stock in Kentucky. At the end of the day, it's still Kentucky, but you know, it's not bad in the SEC when you've won, even though it is the East. You know, you've won 4 out of your last 5 games. And I thought Missouri would get it done. But let's just move on. That game was unexpected for me. Another one that was unexpected for me was the West Virginia and Oklahoma State game. West Virginia was a 5.5-point favorite in that game. We took West Virginia. We did not take – they were 3.5-point favorite. But we took West Virginia actually to cover the spread. I was going to say at 5.5 we wouldn't have, but we did take them to cover the spread, and Oklahoma State just came out swinging. 37-20 victory over the Mountaineers. You know, I thought the Mountaineer defense would show up big and play well. This game was in Stillwater, so it was one of those games that it was a risky pick. Hard to take a road team to cover the spread most of the time, but I felt like West Virginia and Dan Holgerson were playing such good football that they would come in and the defense would dominate the way that it had been all year. West Virginia was undefeated, and now they're 6-1 with a loss there in Stillwater. Oklahoma State really, really looked good. In this game, they did. And Oklahoma State, not a bad football team. Even before that, they were only a one-loss team. So, it was a risky pick. It was a pick that I kind of went out on a limb for because I felt like West Virginia was playing that good of football, right? But Mason Rudolph for Oklahoma State, he was 26 for 36, 273 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. The rushing leader was actually Justin Crawford from West Virginia, 14 carries, 87 yards. So West Virginia, they didn't run the ball the way they'd like to, but it's not bad. And the receiving leader there, James Washington from Oklahoma State, 6 receptions for 117 yards. West Virginia just couldn't stop them. And that's what it was. Again, they came out swinging. 20 points were put up in the first half by Oklahoma State to West Virginia's 10. And West Virginia did not score the third quarter. Oklahoma State continued to put points on the board. They scored 17 points in the second half to West Virginia's 10. And, we saw what happened. 37-20 was the final there. So we missed that game. We'll take it the way that we have to. But the next game on our list here was the Michigan and Michigan State game. Now, if you guys remember last week, I said, and everybody called me crazy, but I said, never take a road team in a rivalry game of this magnitude to win by 25 points practically. It was 24.5-point spread. Michigan, 24.5-point favorite at Michigan State last week. Now, Michigan State has been an awful-looking team so far. I get it. Michigan, quite the opposite. They've been fantastic so far. But it was a 10-point game. Well, 9-point game. Michigan wins this game 32-23. Wilton Spate, I guess, Spite. For Michigan, the passing leader here is 16 for 25, 244 yards, 1 interception. Michigan State really played, probably the best game that they've played all year, and it still was ugly. They're 2-6, 0-5 in the Big Ten. But it's still a huge rivalry game. So I just said, I cannot take Michigan to cover the spread here. We got this one right. So we took Michigan to win this game, but we did not take them to cover the spread. So we got this one right, really, all the way across the board. So it's about time. We need one. We need a win right now at the Blitz here. We're struggling with our picks these last couple of weeks. Okay, we missed. Let's just go on and we missed the next 2 games. So right now we're 1 of 4 this week on the Blitz. Not good. And let me tell you why. Okay, the next game we had from last week was Clemson and Florida State. Clemson was a 4-point favorite on the road, and again, big rivalry game. I love what I see out of the Florida State. Or I love what I see on Florida State's team as far as talent. I know they're struggling here and there, and they're not living up to expectations, but I didn't feel like Clemson was quite the team that they were last year. And to go on the road in a big rivalry game like this and be a 4-point favorite, I didn't see it. Now, if you want us to talk about the spread, we actually got this one right. We took Florida State to win the game. So we do 2 things on the Blitz. We pick the team, and then we also pick the spread, okay? So just because, we took Clemson to not cover the spread doesn't mean we got the game right. We still took FSU to pull the upset here, and then we just threw the spread out the window because Clemson was favored. But we did take FSU to win the game. They did not, but Clemson did not cover the spread there either. So, kind of a 50-50 split right there. I mean, I'm trying to make myself feel better, okay? When you're 1 for 3 and 1 for 4, our next game's Tennessee and South Carolina. I don't know if anybody saw that coming anyway. But when you're 1 for 4, it's you got to try to make yourself feel better, okay? So I'm just going to say that we were taking Clemson here to not cover the spread. which they didn't. They won by 3, but Florida State, there were some controversial calls in that game. We all saw Jimbo Fisher go off at the end of the game on the officials, and I think he had some some ground there. I think he had a couple of good points. This game was there were some bad calls, but I felt like at home FSU that game could have turned their season around and kept them in the playoff picture. I don't know if they would have made the playoff anyway, but it certainly would have given them an opportunity to have an argument. Didn't get it done at the end of the day. Clemson beats Florida State 37-34 in Tallahassee. The passing leaders in this game were Deshaun Watson. He was 27 for 43, 378 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook continuing to shine. This guy's going to be so much fun to watch in the NFL. He had 19 carries for 169 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook, guys, is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Aside from Leonard Fournette, I think he's the best running back in the country. His speed and agility are second to none. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. You talk about fantasy football. This guy might be, I think he's going to be great depending on where he lands. But yeah, 4 touchdowns in this game and 169 yards rushing. You would have thought Florida State, with those kinds of numbers from Dalvin Cook, would win the game. Jordan Leggett, 5 receptions, 122 yards and a touchdown. That's Clemson's receiving leader. The receiving leader of the game from Clemson. Clemson just too much. Deshaun Watson and Clemson just too much. Again, Clemson just kind of squeaked by this game. But let me just say something, too, about Clemson and Florida State. This is a rivalry game that is becoming hot. It's becoming more hot or hotter every year. It's like every time these two teams play, and I said this last week, you got to watch it. It's becoming very, very, very entertaining because the Clemson's recruiting is catching up with Florida State. And it's becoming a really fun game to watch. I really thought Florida State was going to pull this game off. I really did. But let's move on. So pretty much that's a loss for the Blitz again because we did take FSU, okay? Let's move on to this next game here, and I think it surprised everybody. Certainly surprised us here on the Blitz, and if you're a Tennessee fan, you may not be able to get over this one. And I want to stay on Tennessee for just a second. I have, again, a lot of friends and family in Tennessee. And Tennessee coming into the season, we've talked about this a couple of times, a lot of hype, really, the last 2 years. But this year, the hype was, there was more hype surrounding the Tennessee football program coming into this season. There was more hype coming in this year than I can remember, the last time I can remember, probably 10 years. Tennessee starts their season off really mediocre against Appalachian State, started raising some questions. But they kind of right the ship a little bit. They beat a good Virginia Tech team, Battle of Bristol. Then they do the unthinkable. They beat Florida after 12 years of losing, 11 years really. But they beat Florida. They snapped that streak. They beat Georgia with a Hail Mary. They're suddenly a team of destiny. Oh, they're a team of destiny. They're going to, they can't be beat. It's their year. Feels like 98. That's all we heard, right? They go on a bye week. Okay? After losing to, so they beat Georgia. The following week, Texas A&M on the road. They're down big, and they come back and battle in that game, go into overtime and lose that game. Josh Dobbs throws a pick, loses that game, but it's okay. That was, it was okay at that point because we knew A&M wasn't a bad football team. It was on the road. They rallied back, get another chance to right the ship with Alabama the following week. Alabama wipes the field with them. And it's like, okay, well, Now their stretch is the tough stretch is over. The Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and A&M stretch over with. They should win out. No questions asked. And really, they should have. They go on a bye week, and then they play South Carolina, folks. South Carolina. They were 3-4. Tennessee was 5-2. And South Carolina beats Tennessee. Will Muschamp owns Tennessee. I never saw it coming. The spread was 14 points. Spread was 14 in Tennessee's favor, and we took them here on the Blitz. I didn't see it happening. I thought, man, Tennessee, way too talented to come out and lose this way. I mean, they looked horrible. Josh Dobbs, dynamic on the ground. This guy, I think he's completely ruined any chances of going to the NFL. I never really thought he would be an NFL quarterback anyways. He just doesn't have the arm talent. He turns the ball over way too much. He's a dynamic player on the ground, but it was really embarrassing for Tennessee. I mean, they go in South Carolina, one of the worst teams in the league. Maybe the only team worse than them right now, you could say, would be Missouri. But yeah, no reason in the world. Injuries aside, it doesn't matter. When you've been recruiting the way Tennessee has the last few years, and the hype that surrounded the program, you're picked to win the East. You beat Florida. You can't screw it up by losing to South Carolina. It's Tennessee, in my opinion, really hasn't been the team that everybody thought they were, in my opinion, anyways. I think that they barely it took a Hail Mary to beat a very, very poor Georgia team this year. Almost every game that they've played, they've struggled in the first half. They're just not ready to play early. And I think this goes on to the coach. Butch Jones, had a lot of support after that Florida game. He was feeling the heat previously to the Florida game. After the Florida game, he's back on top again, and now all of a sudden we're hearing the chatter once again from the Tennessee fans that maybe Butch Jones isn't the guy. He made changes at defensive coordinator that hasn't really worked out for him this year. I think that there is some problems. There are some problems in Knoxville, and that's a situation to keep an eye on. You've got Jalen Hurd has jumped ship. You've got guys. You have guys, bailing out on them. You've got the fan base, the noise of the fan base. Butch Jones in that press conference. If you didn't see it, go watch it. Guy's sitting on pins and needles. I mean, the most uncomfortable look I've seen out of Butch Jones in a long time. He's feeling the heat, and rightfully so. When you've got the talent Tennessee has, and you're a favorite, they're going to be favored in every game going forward, depending on what happens with Kentucky. And that sounds really funny to say, but Tennessee, there was no excuse to lose this game. South Carolina, unbelievable. So Tennessee stock trending down fast. The Vols, all that hype, all of that success early, suddenly dissipates. And Tennessee now with their backs against the wall, and they still have Kentucky, they have Vanderbilt, and they have Missouri to go. They have Tennessee Tech this week. They should handle them, but my goodness, the way we've seen them play, heck far. You never know. So the Blitz lost that one. We took Tennessee to win this game and cover the spread, so we just lost all the way around. South Carolina wins that game. Jake Bentley, the South Carolina quarterback, get this, 15 for 20, 167 yards, 2 touchdowns. This guy, like brand new, comes in and looks like, Brett Favre out there against this Tennessee defense. Rico Dowdle, the South Carolina running back here, 27 carries, 127 yards, and a touchdown. Tennessee struggled all year to stop the run. Very, very poor run defense, and that was supposed to be what was going to really be fixed with the new hire of Bob Shoop. It's gone quite the opposite way. Deebo Samuel, South Carolina's receiving leader, 8 receptions for 83 yards. Tennessee doesn't have a player in the top performing list here. It was just really embarrassing all the way across the board. So I don't know. I was pulling for Tennessee because I really wanted to get this one right, man, especially the way the day had gone, so far with my picks. But, okay, let's move on. The next game here was Georgia and Florida. We got this one right. We took Florida. We took Florida to cover the spread of 7.5. That Florida defense continues to prove how good they are. You got NFL talent all over the field there in Florida, and Jim McElwain really has a pretty solid team. Now, their offense continues to kind of be a struggle. That's a surprise because Jim McElwain is such an offensive-minded guy. But, it's I don't really know what to think about Florida. I do not think that they're just, unbelievable. They're 6-1. They beat Georgia, big deal. Georgia's not a very good football team. Georgia is 4-4, and Florida did what everybody thought they would do. They would dominate the game defensively. So the passing leaders in this game were Jacob Eason. He was 15 for 33, 143 yards, and 1 touchdown. So that tells you right there wasn't a lot of offensive firepower going around. The rushing leader, Jordan Scarlett from Florida, 26 carries for 93 yards and a touchdown. And Terry Godwin, the Georgia receiver, was the receiving leader, only 57 yards on 5 receptions. So Georgia was struggling to run the ball. They couldn't do anything. That's kind of been the case all year. Maybe the worst offensive line in the SEC. Tennessee's competing with that spot. It's really bad. Offensive line play for Georgia is really embarrassing. And Jacob Eason is doing a fantastic job with this offensive line being terrible, and for a freshman QB to come in with a bad offensive line, they're not able to run the ball, so they're not able to lean on that talented running game that Georgia likes to pride itself on. So the kid's having to drop back, and he improvised a lot in this game, and it was really cool to see Jacob Eason kind of surprised everybody with his running ability in this game. He was able to get out of the pocket, make some plays, improvise, and but at the end of the day, he's got to have some help. And his receivers, we did have some banged-up receivers there. Riley Ridley went out with an ankle sprain. Michael Chigbu didn't really do a lot. And defensively, we really struggled as well. So Georgia, a lot of problems, but I think that they'll get them straightened out going forward. New coaching staff, a lot of young players, and Georgia desperately needs something to pick them up. They get Kentucky this week. But that wraps it up for our picks of last week. So we got 2 games right. 2 games right out of those 6. Really, really bad. A lot of surprises, though. Okay? Let's move on, though, to this week's picks. We got to wrap this thing up, so we'll move through these pretty quick. I have 6 games listed here as my picks of the week. And the first one I'm going to start with, there's a few good games on this week, but this one it's interesting to me. Virginia Tech and Duke. Virginia Tech's a 10.5-point favorite. They're playing on the road at Duke. Duke has kind of surprised people, in some of these games this year. Cutcliffe knows how to coach, flat out. So I think that's what makes this game interesting because Virginia Tech trending in the right direction. They're 6-2. Justin Fuente, fantastic coach. We've really praised him a lot on this show. But Jared Evans, the Virginia Tech passing leader, he's got 2,017 yards and 21 touchdowns on the season right now. This kid's playing really well. So the 10.5-point spread for Virginia Tech, I'm actually going to take Virginia Tech in this game, but I do not think that they cover that spread. I think that Duke will play their tails off and that they'll keep it close. I don't know. We'll say it's a 7.5 or 7-point game. But I like Duke, to keep this game close, but I'll still take the Hokies to win that game. The next game we have on the list, this one's going to be interesting too, and it has some implications as far as the East goes in the SEC. Florida on the road taking on Arkansas. Arkansas is 5-3. Florida 6-1. We just talked about some of Florida's offensive struggles, although they're not really severe. They're still not, impressive. Luke Del Rio kind of still shaking off some of that rust. Florida is a 4-point favorite right now here on this Friday, and they're playing a good Arkansas team. So this is a game that I think I think this is the second game that Florida loses this year. So I do not think they cover that spread. I think Austin Allen and company will get it done. Austin Allen has 2,048 yards on the season with 18 touchdowns. He's 155 for 249. Arkansas's rushing game is really good too. Got Raleigh Williams III, 153 carries for 807 yards and 5 touchdowns on the season. And you also have to watch out for Jared Cornelius, the Arkansas receiver. He's putting up yards. So I like Arkansas at home in this game. Arkansas has disappointed us so far a few times this season, but I like them in this game. I think that Arkansas really is a better all-around football team than Florida is right now. Now Florida, they're going to play great defense. You better believe they're going to have a good defensive scheme. I think they have a good defensive performance, and I think it's very close in Fayetteville. But I'll take the Razorbacks there. The next game we have on our list, guys, is this is kind of another one of those Virginia Tech Duke interesting matchups. Florida State going on the road to play NC State. NC State's been a little surprising this year, right? They've been a little surprising this year, and I like NC State to maybe keep this game close. I think Florida State is kind of. They're going to have some of that hangover from last week's loss. That was a really big game for them. I really thought Florida State needed that game to really keep their morale up. They now take on an NC State team that would love to pull this off. This would be a game that NC State, I think, this could be the game that makes their season. They're playing at home. FSU 5.5-point favorite. I think this is a close game, guys. I think this is a close game. This one might bite me, but I'm going to stick with Florida State. I think you have to watch out for teams that are coming off of a loss like Florida State just had. Emotional. It was a game that meant a lot. It was at home. Now they got to get back on the bus. They got to travel to North Carolina. They got to take on a hungry North Carolina State team. But at the end of the day, I think Florida State is just too talented. I think that NC State keeps this thing fairly close, but I will take Florida State to cover the spread of 5.5. I do think Florida State will rebound a little bit, but I think they struggle and they're a little sloppy. A little hungover from last week, but they're still better. They're still a better football team than North Carolina State is. The next game on the list, we have 2 games, and then we'll have our game of the week, our featured game of the week, Nebraska, Ohio State. This is not the featured game of the week. This is the one right before, but we have Nebraska at Ohio State. Ohio State trying to rebound a little bit from the Penn State loss that no one saw coming, right? I still like Ohio State. They're a 17-point favorite in this game at home. Nebraska, a good football team. Both of these teams are 7-1, top 10 matchup, huge Big Ten matchup. It's an exciting game, but I'm just not sold on Nebraska. I think they're a good football team. They deserve a lot of credit. But at the end of the day, Ohio State let one slip. They should have never lost that game. Very embarrassing, really, when you lose to Penn State. But at the end of the day, Ohio State's still a supremely talented football team. I think that they right the ship. I can't wait to see Michigan-Ohio State, guys. I can't wait to see that game. It's going to be fan-freaking-tastic. It's going to be awesome. All of the hype, certainly, or for sure, it comes back this year for Ohio State and Michigan. It started to kind of come back last year. You could feel it. Now, it's really there. All of the, the rivalry is back in business. So I like Ohio State to make a statement in this game. I think that they come out at home in the shoe and just show Nebraska, hey, we are still Ohio State, and We are supremely talented. We're going to come out and make a statement, get ready for Michigan. This is a game I think Ohio State really puts it all together. Nebraska, though, watch out for Tommy Armstrong, okay? I think he's going to struggle in this game, but he's not playing too bad. 1,764 yards and 11 touchdowns on the season so far. So the kid's playing good. Mike Weber, Ohio State. I love watching this guy run the football. Very good player. He's got 770 yards on the season with 6 touchdowns. And, let's look at this Ohio State receiving corps. Talent really all over. Now, they have showed a little bit of that, youth and inexperience at times. But, you look at a guy like Curtis Samuel, Noah Brown. I really like what I see out of Ohio State, and I think the future is super bright. It continues to be bright under Urban Meyer. And again, I can't reiterate how excited I am for the Michigan-Ohio State game. But I do think Ohio State comes out and puts Nebraska away. I don't know if I'm ready to take a 17-point spread. I'll take Ohio State by 2 touchdowns. I'm not going to say that they cover that 17-point spread. I think Nebraska, although they're going to get beat up a little bit in this game, I still think they're better than the 17-point dog. Okay, guys, we're getting wrapped up, and I got to say that our featured game of the week, y'all know what it is. It's Alabama and LSU, and Alabama, big game for them. I think this might be the toughest game that they have to play so far, or that they've played so far this year. I like LSU's fight in this game. Bama's a 7.5-point favorite on the road. It's tough to play in Death Valley, especially at night. Orgeron, they've already said you beat Bama, the job is yours. That's what they told him. I think LSU comes out and plays their asses off in this game. We know they can match up talent, maybe not depth all the way down the line, but talent, they have the horses to play with Bama. We've talked about this. LSU, Ohio State, Florida State, these guys have horses. I think Bama's a better football team. They're a more complete football team. I think Bama wins the game. But I think this game is the game of the week. I can't wait for it. It's going to be really good. You're going to see these guys come out and, I think that Alabama will come out and play the way that we always see Alabama play, right? They come out, they're fiery, they're stingy on defense. But LSU starting to get a little fire under them. Look for them to really try to frustrate Jalen Hurts. I think the defense for Alabama is just a little too strong, but I like this game, and I think it's a 3-point game. I think it's Alabama's first real scare of the season. I'm going to take the Tigers and Ed Orgeron with the job on the line. You know he wants that job. Guys, that's it for the Blitz here on this Friday. We thank you again for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the show. Comment. Let me know what you think. If something you want me to talk about next week. Can I give a shout out to my Cowboys? Cowboys playing good football. My wife's a Steelers fan. We got that game coming up in a couple weeks. That's going to be fun. There's going to be some stuff broken around the house. You know what I'm saying? All right, guys. Thanks. That's my time. Thanks for listening to The Blitz. We'll see you next time. Have a great weekend of college football.